Hey, folks, for episode 75 of the Rental Roundtable, just got off with Dr. Vince Hafeli. He's the president of Ajax Paving with over 600 employees. But more importantly, he's an expert on mental health. He's a doctorate and he speaks at hundreds of different events around the importance of mental health, particularly construction. And I would say this is the most important episode we've ever recorded because mental health and the well-being of people is not talked about very often, particularly in construction, where 90% of the employees are male. There's a high number of veterans, higher number of chronic pain and substance abuse, and the on-site job injuries and deaths is about a fifth of what the suicide rate is for folks in the construction industry. So we talked about what is mental health, why is there a stigma around it, and how as an organization, as a leader, you can build that into your culture. So why the CEO and the owner needs to lead the charge here, at least to get the ball started and be consistent around the importance of talking about how people are doing in mental health. Talked about you don't need to spend any money on this. A lot of your benefits packages already have mental health programs built into it, and you can use what you have to get started. And talk about servant leadership and ultimately just asking people how they're doing. And that sometimes is enough for creating a safe environment for people to be honest around what's going on in their lives, and ultimately, being their full selves to work every day, which will build a better culture and better company, but also just better way to take care of your people. So, really appreciate Dr. Hafeli coming on, shared his personal experience with his bout with depression and even wanting to take his own life. And again, probably the most important episode we've recorded. Hope you guys enjoy. All right, folks, for episode 75 of the Rental Roundtable, we have on Dr. Vince Hafeli. Dr. Hafeli, welcome to the show today.
Thank you for having me here.
Yeah, so today we're going to talk about mental health in the broader construction industry, as obviously that relates to rental. It's a very important topic that doesn't get talked about uh, enough, to be honest. And just for our listeners, episode 63, we had on Dan Maitland from Ajax Paving. Dr. Vince Hafeli is the president of Ajax Paving. But if you want to learn more about Ajax, episode 63 with Dan was awesome. We talked about what it's like from a contractor's perspective going through the rental experience. Really fun episode to record. So, I guess first question, Dr. Hafeli, it's on your LinkedIn. So I've done one Ironman. I've been very proud of that. You've done 11. Uh, what drives someone to do 11 Ironman triathlons? That's maybe 10 too many, or maybe 11 too many. What drives you to do that?
I've never been accused of being overly intelligent, so maybe that's a piece of it. What drove me to doing 11 of them? I don't know. I mean, I was in a bookstore in Port Charlotte on a rainy day and found a book that said 6 weeks to your first triathlon for a sprint one. So I bought the book and took it home, and I found one in Boca Grande, Florida in 5 weeks. And I told my wife, well, I got to skip the first week of training. I got to go buy some tennis shoes, a bicycle, and some goggles, so I'll be ready. And I nearly died on that one. And once I did one, I mean, they become kind of addicting.
Yeah.
If you enjoyed the experience, and if you didn't, you only do one, and you walk away a wiser man probably for only doing one. I
Do
just
you have Do you have
just
the
having
tattoo?
fun.
Did you get the Ironman tattoo?
I have not got a tattoo, and I will probably die without one. I have nothing against them.
Yeah.
My son's got tattoos everywhere. I don't have any.
Yeah.
So,
My brother's done one. My dad has done five. My dad's got the Iron Man tattoo on his calf. He's very proud of it. So I don't have it. I did my one. I know I did it. Uh, Props to you for doing 11. When was your most recent one, by the way? You still do these actively, or is that more in the past?
I was God, it's been probably 5 years ago, but over
Okay.
Labor Day, I just signed up for another one and bought me a new bike, so I'm back at it.
You're back. You got the itch. It's in your blood now. Well, very impressive. We could talk about the triathlon journey for a whole separate episode here, but I always like to start these with people's background and history. So you've been at Ajax Paving for a long time, 600 employees. Tell me about what your day job is. Running Ajax Paving, and then tell me about how you got interested in mental health.
What's my day job? Some days I don't think I really do anything around here. We have such a great group of people. I mean, Dan's one of them.
Yeah,
Um, I'm the president. I'm blessed that I'm actually involved with a lot of associations in our industry where I'm able to go out and make a difference. The day-to-day operations, I really don't dive into a great deal anymore. Uh, I just serve on a lot of boards, helping the industry, uh, serve on some mental health boards, helping in that arena, and to try to make our community where we work better places.
Yeah. And how did you get into Ajax Paving just initially? If you want to touch on that briefly.
I went to work for engineering firms in 1985, and from 85 to '02, I was involved in the material testing side of the business and also the geotechnical side. And the DOT went to contractor quality control in the early 2000s, and Ajax brought me in to set up their quality control program. So I came here in '02 as their quality control manager. In '04, I became the general manager and took over all their plant operations. And then '07 became the vice president, and '19 became the president.
So 23 years or so. When you started, did you think you'd be here for over 20 years?
Well, I mean, I guess you kind of hope you do. I probably didn't have
Yeah.
any expectation because from '85 to '02, I had worked for 5 different companies over
Yeah.
17 years. So the chances that I would be here 23 years, probably the stat didn't say that, but here I am.
Here you are. And tell me how you started getting into mental health. How did you go from running Ajax Paving, doing 11 Ironman to saying, "Hey, I want to be an expert in mental health." What was that? What led you to that?
I didn't have any plan to do it. I went back to work on my doctorate degree in January of 21, and I wanted to research kind of frontline, mid-level leadership, how we take great equipment operators in our industry. And when the foreman leaves, we tell a guy, "Hey, you're so great at running a roller, you'll make a great supervisor. So we're going to make you the foreman." And we set them up for failure because we don't give them any of the tools they need to do the job.
Mm.
So I wanted to research what maybe other industries had done to learn from that and try to build a model to fix things in our industry. And in June of 21, I told one of the professors, "Hey, this is what I'm going to research." And he kind of looked at me and laughed and said, "That's pretty weak. You ought to go find something better to research." They already studied why great physicians make terrible hospital administrators. So the model's out there. You just got to go read it. And so I had done a paper that back in April of that year that got published at a conference over in India. And the hook line in the front of the paper to get everybody to read all the boring stuff in the back was I talked about suicide in our industry. So I went back in July to that same professor and said, "Hey, how about suicide in the industry?" And he asked why, and I started telling him some of the reasons behind that. And he said, "If you could do that, that would be pretty powerful." So I got there by a professor telling me what I wanted to research was pretty weak. But
And
there's a background behind that too, and I assume we'll probably go through that. So,
yeah, tell me some of that background. Tell me, you're getting your PhD in business administration. You're doing some research on suicide in the construction industry. Like, what you obviously had to experience that or know the stats or maybe a personal experience, because the average person probably doesn't think about suicide in the construction industry, right? So, what about your background sort of led you to realize that was a major issue to look at?
well, the background was I went through some struggles in my life, and I grew up in a generation where men were expected to be men and not talk about your emotions or struggles or don't talk about your feelings.
Mhm.
And so, what happened to me, I'm not going to tell you. There have been people that have had way worse things happen to them than what happened to me. But in May of '89, I learned that my brother was terminally ill. 2 months later, in July, my father passed. And in November and December, my wife and I lost twin sons that we had. And in 1993, my brother passed, and my mother passed shortly after that. And so while all that was happening, I did what I was told to do. I didn't talk to anyone. internalized it and kept it inside. It changed me. I turned into a pretty bitter, selfish, self-centered individual. And so I carried that with me for a lot of years. And in 2007, about a half mile from where I'm sitting here at the office, I came out here behind our plant one night to take my own life, and I got a telephone call that stopped me. And so from '07 until 21, we didn't talk about that night. The only people that knew about that night was my son and what would become my ex-wife. We didn't talk about it because men don't talk about that, right? So that was a piece of it. And then when I began to do some preliminary research, I learned that in the mining and construction industry, we are the number one sector in the US when it comes to suicides. Construction alone is number two.
Hmm.
Most people talk about military veterans and how many of those we lose to suicide. We lose about 17 a day. Yet construction workers, we lose 14 to 18 a day. So, I mean, we're right where the military veterans are. Yet in our industry, we lose about 2 to 3 a day to job related injuries, trench collapse, hit by a car, electrocution, whatever that may be. Yet we're losing a construction worker at a rate of every 2 hours. So that became, I guess, the motivation why to do it. I had a personal story, and the research actually really became like a self healing piece of my life. It allowed me to begin to talk about things, and it made me realize and learn that everything I had been told about men not wanting to share, men not wanting to listen was wrong, because
Hmm.
I pretty quickly learned that once you open up to other men in this industry, suddenly they line up wanting to talk to you to tell you about their story and ask questions.
Mm. Well, thank you for sharing that. And you can read all the stats. We'll talk about some of the data here, but I imagine there was a personal story and something that you experienced personally with all the trauma that you went through and carried and shoved down to a point that you couldn't bear it anymore, right? And there's my dad was military, and I love my dad, but there's an element of just like grit, right? And don't talk about it, show up to work. But there's also an element that maybe vulnerability is actually true strength, right? And being able to talk about those things, especially for men in particular, uh, is important. So, what did you learn in your? I'm curious. Part of your healing process, you said part of your doctorate, like going through the research process, was healing for you. What did you learn through that experience around some of the themes you saw when you think about suicide in the construction industry? What are some of the things you learned?
Well, in my research, I interviewed 13 people that lost someone to suicide,
Hmm.
and 12 of those stayed in the research, and they're in a book I published, their stories. So I got to hear what other people were going through that helped. Um, Probably one of the things that helped was Dr. Wolgamuth, Jenny Wolgamuth, uh, told me, I'll help you with your research, but you got to promise me you'll go find a therapist to talk to. And she said, because I know your background and this research is going to get pretty deep when you're sitting with people listening to their story about their brother or their father or whoever it may have been. So I did, and um, I didn't want to because men don't do that, but I did because I had so much respect for him. That greatly helped me a lot. Um, and then the other piece of my research was I interviewed industry executives from across the US. I interviewed about 30 of them, and to learn what successful companies were doing that were addressing this. And so that helped me develop a model that we put in here at Ajax. And so rolling that model out and now being able to share that with companies across the US, I mean, that was another piece of the healing and being able to give back to the industry and to give back to other companies. uh, to try to stop the next guy from going down that path.
Mm. So, can you share some of what those models look like? Because a lot of our listeners are, owners or presidents running rental companies. That, hundreds of employees or maybe just a few employees, and they've maybe never thought about mental health, and maybe they're starting to realize that's an issue. What are some of the things that business leaders in particular should be doing to address this?
Well, there was only one thing that 100% of the people that I interviewed agreed upon. And the one thing that they all said, unprovoked, was that for any health initiative, mental health initiative to be successful in a company, it has to be rolled out by the CEO or the president or CFO.
Mm,
It got to be rolled out at the top. And once it's rolled out, those people have to continue to stand behind it and support it. That doesn't mean they got to talk about it every day. That doesn't mean they got to lead the charge every day. But hey, key annual meetings, key safety days, maybe just a talk out in the field, a huddle or a toolbox talk. They can lead it. A lot of organizations, bigger ones, will hand it off to their HR department or the safety department. But in a smaller company that doesn't have an HR or safety department, it may be the owner and his wife that have to continue to carry
yeah,
the torch. And probably the key thing that a lot of people need to know is you don't need to spend a lot of money. Maybe you don't need to spend any money to do this. And I encourage companies. I mean, some of your people, rental companies, I'm sure have health insurance for their employees. And if they have health insurance for their employees, there's probably something embedded in there that addresses mental health. It may be that they get 2 visits a year, 6 visits a year, but there's probably something in there.
yeah,
So, one, I would encourage people, don't go spend any money to add anything to your program. Learn what you have. And if you do have some tools in your program, then you need to find out if the tools are any good. And you do that by calling the number. If you've got a number in your employee assistance program, call that number and find out what happens when you call. Do you get an answering service? Do you get a machine? How long does it take to get a call back? And find out if what you've got works, and what you have may be great and what you have may not be so great. And so that gives you an opportunity when you get ready to do your annual renewal on your insurance next year to tell your carrier, hey, the physical health piece of the program is working great, but the mental health, maybe we need to tweak. And, after 20, I don't know, probably 21 months or something, we added another tool to our program, but we didn't add it to our program until what we knew we had, because we had stuff that we didn't even know until
mm,
we began to look into it. And until the people knew what we had, because I didn't want to go to the owner of our company and tell him, hey, we just did this $40,000 add on. And oh, by the way, nobody's using it either because they weren't using any of the other stuff we had because nobody still knows about it. So, one, don't go spend a lot of money to do it. Don't overcomplicate it. It's really just about being like a servant leader, servant leadership style, by serving your employees, asking them what you can do for them, being open with them, being honest with them, being sincere with them, and being there for them when they need you. Um, that's about it, how complicated it is. It's really just about being a good person and looking out and supporting one another.
yeah. And I think the first thing you said was starting. It's got to start at the top.
Got
The
to start at the
owner,
top.
the president, the CEO. They need to bring the light to the importance of mental health, right? And being able to talk about that. You said not every day, but at least consistently over some period of time. And then you said also to use the resources that already exist. So you're saying a lot of benefits, a lot of health insurance have some component of therapy or counseling or mental health built into the health insurance. Am I understanding properly?
Yeah. And I mean, we did, but we didn't know to what extent because we didn't use them,
Yeah.
we didn't promote them. So, yeah, find out what you have.
And then that third piece, servant leadership, just being a good person. I mean, that sounds like just generally caring about people, right? Asking him, you know, how they're doing. Not how's your work going, but how are you doing as an individual and checking on folks. Is that right?
That's right. And, I- I'm not here to try to fool anyone to say that this is easy for a man to go and do, right?
Yeah.
Because you still got that mentality. Hey, I'm the leader. I got to be strong. I got to be the guy. And hey, there are a lot of female leaders in our company now, and not in our company, in this industry. And they want to portray that image as well, right? So I, I think what you will learn is if you can say, hey, we're going to address mental health. And if you have a story to tell, that's great. But if you don't have a story to tell, share my story if you want. I mean, I've got TEDx talks. You can,
Yeah.
a 12-minute blip you can put up there, let your employees see, and it tells about my story. It tells about me telling my owner of the company and what that felt like.
Yeah.
So there's, there's things out there that you can use to break the ice. Uh, I had a gentleman interviewing me, and he told me that he had had some heart conditions and they hid it from other employees because they
Mm,
didn't want that employee to know that he had been sick and under the weather because they'd have concerns about who was leading the company and who was in charge. And after he talked, he said, I'm going to go back and let everybody know that I've been sick because I think it's important that they know that,
mm.
hey, I'm flesh and bone just like they are. I have struggled just like they do. And as much as I am there to support them, I learned that they were there to support me as well.
Yeah. And I'm curious your story. You struggled with mental health in 2007 or so, maybe years leading up to that. You were also in construction. Do you think working in construction made you a higher risk for wanting to take your own life, or do you think that was just a correlate, maybe just a unlucky correlation or something? Do you think your construction background made you more likely to be depressed or want to take your own life?
Yes, partly because I go back to it was probably early in 1986 on a job down in Ponce
Yeah.
Inlet, Florida, at a condominium site. Um, I just remember a superintendent there that if he wasn't yelling, he wasn't talking. And
Hmm.
I can remember him telling people, leave your crap at the gate. We got enough problems around here. I don't need to hear about what's going on in your life.
Hmm.
In 2002, I had told the president of Ajax that when he was actually 2003, I said, when you're done being president, I want to run the company. And so when these struggles began to build more in '05 and '06 till that night in '07, I thought to myself, God, if I go to him and tell him what I'm going through, there's no way he's going to let me run the company. Because if I'm him, I'm thinking if you can't even manage your own personal life, why am I going to give you the keys to manage this organization?
Hmm.
So yeah, I mean, it definitely played into my keeping it in and keeping it a secret.
So you're in this culture where you don't talk about your feelings, perceived as weak, and maybe you can get by for some period of time, but when trauma hits you, when it all hits all of us, life is hard and we all will have our times. You're already sort of conditioned to not open up, to put on the smile, to keep going. So that underlying culture of grit, don't say how you're feeling, being vulnerable is weak. When that's the culture and something hits you, you're already in a position where you're not really well equipped to deal with it, right?
Yeah, 100%. You just be a man, be tough, keep it
Yeah,
in.
and I think your last point on servant leadership and asking people how they're doing, for me, we're a much smaller company than yours, but I check in with everybody 12 weeks. I've got questions. What is the company doing well? What are we not doing well? What are you most proud of? And I have 5 questions I asked. I added a sixth question, which is actually uncomfortable for me to ask. And I say, first, before we get into this, how are you doing as a person? And it's hard to ask that. And people are like, it's what shocked me is you could tell people haven't been asked that question in years sometimes. Like
Yeah.
generally, like before we talk about your work performance and the company, how are you doing as a person? And it's sort of uncomfortable to even ask that question because people just don't even, they almost break down and cry. The fact that you even ask, how are you
Yeah.
doing? That question alone can break the ice, right? And I think what I've learned, and this is only in the last 2 months I've started asking that question, it's like, oh my gosh, people, there's a lot of isolation and alienation and loneliness in this world. And if you really stop to ask people how they're doing, you start to realize that.
If you're alive in this world and your ears are open and you're looking around and you tell me that you don't have some lows in your life, and I'm not talking about lows where you're going to go out and try to end your life, but just some low days. I mean, you're not being honest with yourself or me. We just it's a tough place and time right now.
Yeah. I don't know if it's getting any, are we getting more connected, more unified, more open as, people in this world in 2025? Yeah, I don't know. I don't think so necessarily. I would probably say no. It's becoming more and more important to be honest. I think even as the leader though, like, I think the first part is part of servant leadership is also you have to take care of yourself, making sure you're emotionally in a good spot, right? When like,
Mhm.
I've got little kids now, they talk about every time you get on an airplane, they're like, look, oxygen mask comes on, put yours on first, and then put your 2-year-old on, right? And it's counterintuitive to kind of do it in the opposite direction. So as a leader who is maybe not thought about mental health and you're realizing, all right, I need to lead my organization to talk about mental health. But man, I've never even taken care of my own self in years. How do you get started as a leader who's going, man, I haven't looked at myself in the mirror emotionally in 10 years. No one's asked me how I'm doing. Do you have to get your own sort of like inner self in order to lead your organization on mental health, or can you do both in parallel? Like, how do you think about that?
Well, I think you got to kind of have your own self aligned, and I did that by going and talking to a therapist,
Yeah.
and that worked for me. Maybe other people that hey, my father was gone, my brother was gone, my mother was gone. I just didn't feel like I had anybody I could talk to. So maybe it's different for different people, but I always had this vision of going to see a therapist. You got to walk in, you got to lay down on the sofa, and they're analyzing you, and it's really nothing like that. And so, in the talks I give, I tell men I think it's important that you understand what it's like going to a therapist. And the first time it's like going on a date. You got any kids? You got any hobbies? What do you like to eat? I mean, so you feel pretty good about it, and you go back the second time, and after about 15 minutes, you think, okay, now she's analyzing me. This is not as comfortable as the first visit it was.
Yeah.
And you walk back in on the third visit, and she says, okay, Vince, you suffer from ADD, depression, anxiety, and you're controlling. And I look at her and say, what the heck do you want me to do with that? Because I've never been any of those things. And so when it's time to go back the following week, you do what any man would do. You cancel and don't go. And the following week, you cancel again and don't go. And then I finally went back because I learned that mental health and mental illness is not what my dad told me. Um, I was always told that if you talk about your struggle, they'll take you to Anna Jonesboro. That's where the mental institution is in southern part of
Mm,
Illinois, where I grew up, and that's where they will lock you up. But it- mental depression just means that for more than 14 days, so on the 15th day, something in your life has changed. I'm a binge eater when I'm depressed or upset. I just want to eat everything I see. If you do that for 15 days, you're going through some depression. Maybe you can't
mm,
sleep and you're normally a great sleeper. You're going through depression. But just like you can have a sprained ankle, you can have an ankle with torn ligaments in it, or you can have an ankle that's decapitated, cut off. Mental illness is kind of the same way. On a 0 to 10, maybe it is like my dad told me, and maybe they do need to put you somewhere to protect yourself and others.
yeah.
Or maybe it was like it was for me. Maybe I needed to talk to the therapist. Or maybe someone has a great relationship with their priest or a golfing buddy or someone that they can talk to. So Yeah, I think you got to kind of find out where you're at and help yourself before you can go take care of other people.
Hmm.
Because I mean, I'll be honest, and depending on how far they goes in your company, you can get some employees coming to you with some pretty deep things, and they can begin to weigh on you. But once you get through those and you see them come out on the other side, it's probably going to be maybe one of the most rewarding things that you do in your career. You know, Labor Day, I got a call from an employee at 7:42 p.m. the Saturday before Labor Day, and when he called me for the first 10 minutes, I couldn't understand a word he was saying because he was just hysterically crying. I mean, he was just over the edge. And then an hour and 10 minutes later, when we got off the phone, we were both laughing. And he told me, he said, I know we have all these tools in our program and all these different places we can call for help, but I didn't want to talk to a stranger. I wanted to talk to you because you treat me like a son. And he apologized for calling me. And I said, "Hey, I don't want you to apologize for calling me because you don't have you don't have any idea how honored I am that you would call me and trust me to talk about what's going on in your life."
Hmm.
And getting as rewarding as it is to go pick up a $10 million paving job, or as rewarding as it is to go sell a $500,000 paver or rent one in your industry, that comment that he trusted me that much trumps all those other things.
I mean, that's gotta be the most rewarding thing in your career. Like, what else is more important than that? You know, helping someone in crisis, in need, right?
Yeah.
I think about, you know, the you were talking about that, and he's apologizing, you're like arms wide open. Think about the prodigal son story, right? And the son was wayward and comes back, and he just open arms, right?
Yeah.
And I think that is what great leadership is. And my question is, you know, for someone, one of your employees, to feel comfortable to call you and open up about something very personal, do you think they would have felt comfortable doing that if you hadn't been so open about the importance of mental health and talking about that as an organization? Do you think if you had sort of stayed as a traditional average construction company who doesn't talk about this and shoves it down, do you think they would have felt comfortable to call you?
Oh, 100% no, he would not have. I mean, I have no doubt.
Yeah.
Um, and I kind of go back to January 3rd, 22, when I got up on the stage of one of our safety days and told them we were going to begin addressing mental health and suicide in the company. I told them we were going to do this very, very slow. We're going to do 4 toolbox talks this year. That's all we're going to do. We're not going to cram anything down your throats. We're not going to make you do things you're uncomfortable with. We're just going to begin having conversations. And within hours of that meeting ending, I began getting telephone calls and text messages and emails. I mean, one of them I got was from a superintendent. He wanted to let me know that he had an equipment operator that he thought had been struggling for
Mm.
months, but he said I didn't know if I could talk to him or should I talk to him or what would I say. And suddenly after today, I realized that God, you can have a conversation with him. And we did. He said we talked for an hour on the way back to Tampa. And he said he got some thing going on in his life and he's going to get with Sandy in HR and find out what we can do to help him. And then in July, he came up to me at our mid-year safety meeting and he said, I want you to know that what you did, you saved my marriage and you saved my career. So this was all going on before we said we would do something about it. And he wasn't talking about it. And the guy that was his boss didn't know if he could talk to him about it. So he didn't talk to him about it. And suddenly, once we said, hey, we're going to talk about it, it happened that quick. And people just began to open up and talk. I mean, I never knew the guy that set one door for me where I'm at here today lost his father to suicide. I never knew the guy 2 doors to the left lost two uncles to suicide. I never knew the lady at the end of the hall had stopped her own mother from suicide. She's also lost a couple family members. I mean, suddenly all these stories and things that people had held, suddenly they wanted to talk about it and reach out for some comfort.
Mm. It's those things that people feel embarrassed or shamed. They don't talk about, and as soon as you open the door, it's like, funny you say that. My neighbor or I personally struggled with something, and a lot of what you're saying as a leader is breaking the ice t- into a into a topic that's sometimes seen as taboo for whatever reason. It's like don't ask someone how they're actually doing. As a man who's running a business, we talk about everything in the world except for that, right?
Mm.
And I think as a leader, you're breaking the ice to say, hey, not only is it okay to talk about these things, but like we should be because we're all struggling with different things, right? And as a company, so if I'm a leader listening to this episode, and I've maybe addressed my own mental health, and I've generally see the importance of this, and I'm in a good spot. How do you start to bring this to the company in a way that you could start to break that ice in a way that starts to open the doors for your employees?
Well, we talked about it at that annual safety day. Everybody in the company was there. So
Yeah.
that was the first place I did it. And then a couple months later, I talked to our credit manager and our safety director, and I said, You know, we've started this initiative, and when I retire, it'll go away because I'm the one that's carrying it."
Mm,
So I said, "I was thinking maybe we ought to start a team, and I don't want to call it the Ajax Mental Health Team because nobody likes the word mental health." And I said, "Hey, I was thinking maybe the Ajax Warriors or something like that." And I said, "You all come up with a name." Well, the Ajax Warriors stuck, and more than 10% of our company now are warriors. And to be part
mm,
of, to be one of the warriors, we get you certified as a mental health first aid responder. They teach you what to look for, what types of questions to ask, what not to ask. So you get some training to be part of that. Um, all of the supervisors in our company, foremen, superintendents, they go through a 2-hour program out of the University of Colorado called VitalCog, and they get VitalCog certified again, things to look for and what to do. And we don't require people to be a warrior. We don't require anyone to get VitalCog certified. And we won't fire you if you don't get certified. We just won't let you manage any of our people. We'll put you in a different role because if you don't care about our most important asset, our people,
mm.
then we're going to put someone in a role that does. So building the team really helped. Uh, Now I don't have to go talk about it all the time. I do still talk about it and I still go out in the field. I still do presentations in the company. But, there's 50, 60 people now that are spread out in the company
Mm,
so that when a guy out on a paving crew is having a struggle and he knows that the MOT foreman is on the Warriors, he may be more comfortable going and talking to him than he is coming to see me.
mm. That's awesome. You've created something that will outlast you, right? You built an organization of mental
Yeah.
health warriors, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the important part is you can get the ball rolling. You don't need to carry. I mean, as any entrepreneur knows, like you get the ball rolling, you build the organization, set the vision. Your people build the company, right? And you have 600 people building the company. You also have what, 60 people building the mental health importance in your organization too, right? And I think that's the other lesson here for people listening is like it's got to be start at the top. You've got to be consistent and leading this, but at the same time, you can let go of that and let people run with this, right? And that's how you probably get true sustainability on the importance of mental health.
Yeah. And, I've got a document we put together I can share with you when we're done. You can share with your
Yeah,
people. I mean, it's a page and a half how to do
yeah,
this. And we brought in a group of university researchers that interviewed our people, and then we tweaked the program a little bit based on
yeah.
what they said. I mean, I'm not going to tell you the end all to fix everything, but it's a tool you can use to begin with. That's not very complicated.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I'm thinking, we have 30 people at my company. It's technology. We're halfway between construction and in software, but most of our employees are men. And, I'm thinking I would love to start something within our organization too. So for me, I've seen the importance of all this in 2019, nothing compared to what you went through, but I lost my mother to brain cancer and then I was laid off and it was just sort of one thing. And I had a really bad case of COVID and it was just like, man, one thing after another. One of the things that Uber did, which I really liked, was they talked about the importance of mental health and they paid for counseling and therapy. And I wouldn't have gone had done it myself, but it was one of the benefits of working there, and it changed my life, right? Being able to talk to someone, and so I've seen the other side of it myself. So, uh, probably why I want to have you on this episode is because I know the importance of taking care of your mental health, and I know it's got a stigma to it, but I would say it's not even limited to just the construction. It's more prevalent in construction because it's predominantly male. There's a high number of veterans, with their both statistically at a higher risk of suicide. There's chronic pain and substance abuse likely higher in construction, but this is something that touches all Americans, really everywhere around the world. Loneliness, alienation, depression, and I think the first step is just talking about it.
When I interviewed all these people for my research, I would ask all of them a standard list of questions. And one of the questions is, if I say the words mental health, what comes to mind?
Hmm.
That's what a lot of them would say. Crickets, right?
Not sure.
And some would say, hey, it's bipolar depression, anxiety. And but see, that's not what mental health is. That's mental illness.
Hmm.
We want people to have positive mental health, just like, hey, if you're an owner of a company and you have a health program for your employees, and if you incentivize them to be healthy, they'll go to the doctor less. And if they go to the doctor less, your premiums will be less, right? So we want people to be physically healthy, but we don't want to talk about the mental health piece because we think mental health means mental illness, but it
Hmm.
doesn't. I can have a struggle today. If I got an employee that's driving to work today and he gets a call on the way to the work that the wife says, hey, I just got the results from the doctor and I have breast cancer. Suddenly he's not in such a great place mentally. I didn't say he's
Hmm.
mentally ill, he's not mentally disturbed, but he just got some shocking news and he's not in a great place mentally. Wouldn't you rather that guy call you and say, maybe I shouldn't be driving the transport today out delivering some equipment because my mind's just not here? I need a day to regroup. Or would you rather him to hide it and go out and cut someone off and have a wreck? Or would you rather him be open and honest with you and you say, hey, I get it, I understand. Look at somebody else today to deliver the equipment, get home and check with your wife and talk to me this evening about where you're at and if you'll be okay for tomorrow. So we ought to encourage people to talk about their mental health. If that same guy showed up and he had thrown his back out a little bit on Sunday at the house working in the yard, you have an expectation when he shows up Monday morning. You want him to tell you, hey, I injured my back over the weekend. You don't
Yeah.
want him to tell you Monday afternoon, hey, I injured my back this morning loading a piece of equipment, right? We want them to show up and be honest about their physical health, but we don't want them to show
Right.
up and be honest about their mental health.
Hmm. Why is that? Well, and I mean, it's been a cultural stigma for a long time. Why is that, and how do we change it?
It's that because people associate mental health and mental illness as one thing, and
Mm,
nobody wants to raise their hand and say, I'm mentally ill, even though
mm,
they're saying I'm going through a mental health struggle today. And the mental health struggle is that I got some bad news and I'll be okay, but I need a few hours. So people strongly associate physical health and physical injury differently than they do mental health and mental illness. I think if they could go back and instead of having mental illness, if they would have called it mental injury, it may be looked at
mm,
completely different.
mm. Yeah, it's separating that, like, you may not be at 110% from a mental health perspective, and that still can mean you don't need to be in a mental hospital, which, like, 99% of the time you don't need to be, right? It's just acknowledging that, like, life is hard and unexpected things happen, and what you're saying is creating the foundation so that when things happen, it's acceptable to talk about it, and not people feel they're gonna lose their job or lose respect or anything like that.
You're a lot less likely to have an accident. You're a lot less likely to injure yourself or someone around you if you have a little bit of a physical injury compared to if you've got a mental injury going on because your mind's somewhere else. I mean, hey, I fell off of a ladder last night from 10 feet and landed on my shoulder, and I got bruises and bumps on me
Yeah,
today from it. I'm the old man that fell off of a ladder, but I'm performing fine.
yeah,
But if I got a call that told me my wife had got killed on the way to work this morning, I wouldn't be mentally fine. And I'm more apt to injure myself or somebody else because I got some mentally news compared to some physical news.
Yeah.
And we want them to hide that physical news. That's what we have to change.
Yeah. And I think we change it by talking about it, right? And I think this is probably we've done 75 episodes, maybe the most important episode, right? And my thought is if one person listens to this and it makes them go, you know what, I'm not okay, and I need to talk about it, it would be worth it, right? So, um, Dr. Hafley, we're just out of time here. I appreciate you coming on. The last question I usually ask is what's the best career advice you've gotten, but for this episode, I'd maybe ask, what would you say to someone who is, maybe having a hard time, either because things happened, they've had some trauma in their life, or maybe everything is fine and you can still be depressed, right? What advice would you have someone who's really going, and I'm not maybe at 100%. What would you say to them?
Find something tomorrow that's important for you to be here for in your mind,
Mhm.
and find someone to talk to help you figure out how to get to that next day every day. And hey, if you make it to the next day every day and you have a plan, things will eventually get better. I firmly believe that. Um, you just got to get to the next day,
Mm. One day at a time.
one
Have
day at a
something,
time.
have purpose, and have someone who can help you get there and talk to.
Yeah.
So, Dr. Hafley, thanks again for coming on. Really awesome episode. Appreciate you sharing your experience and everything you're doing for the construction industry.
Well, thank you for having me.